So, how does a prince born into a life of just unbelievable luxury end up creating a whole philosophy that says, hey, maybe all this worldly pleasure isn't the answer? We're going to dive into the story of Buddhism today. And it's a story about one man's personal crisis hitting at the exact moment his entire society was desperate for a change. But here's the thing, this isn't just about one guy. It's about why his ideas caught on like wildfire and started a spiritual revolution. And to really get that, we have to go back and look at the world he was born into. We're talking 500 BC India, a place that was just simmering with tension, both socially and religiously. So what did that world even look like? Well, to understand why Buddhism grew, you've got to understand the soil it was planted in. And that soil was a society built on these really rigid rules and a growing feeling that the whole system just wasn't working anymore. At the very heart of everything was this social structure called the Varna system. So you had the Brahmins, right, the priests. They were at the very top of the pyramid. They were the keepers of all the religious secrets and rituals. Right below them, you had the Kshatriyas. They were the warriors, the kings, the rulers. Then came the Vaishyas, your merchants, your farmers. And at the bottom, the Shudras, who served the other three. For, centuries, this was just how things were. But by the time we get to the 6th century BC, you can see the cracks starting to show. The Kshatriya kings were starting to look around and ask, wait a minute, why are we, the guys with all the power and the armies, ranked below the priests? And at the same time, you've got the Vaishya merchant class, who are getting richer and more powerful. They're not happy about these super expensive animal sacrifices that are bad for their farming businesses, and they're really not happy about religious rules against lending money with interest. That was the entire engine of their trade. So you basically had the most powerful and the wealthiest groups feeling totally boxed in. The stage was set for a new idea, something that could break them out. And right into this pressure cooker of social friction, a man is born. A man whose own personal crisis would end up offering a way out of the collective one. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha was a prince, a kshatriya. And there was this prophecy when he was born that said he'd either become a great king or a great spiritual leader. Well, his dad wanted a king, for sure, so he decided to basically build a bubble around his son, shielding him from anything that might make him think about the spiritual path. Siddhartha grew up in these amazing palaces, with no idea what old age or sickness or even death really was. But when he's 29, he gets curious and decides to venture outside the palace. And for the very first time in his life, he sees an old man, just frail and hunched over, and it just floors him. He had never even considered that people's bodies get old and break down. On his next trip out, he sees a man just consumed by disease. The reality of physical pain, of sickness, it becomes terrifyingly real to him. Another huge crack in his perfect, sheltered world. And then he sees a dead body being carried off to be cremated. This is the first time he's ever seen death, and the realization that everyone he loves, and even himself, will end this way, it just completely shatters his reality. But then he sees a fourth sight, and this one stops him in his tracks. It's a wandering holy man, an ascetic, who has nothing but a simple bowl, and yet his face is totally calm, totally serene. And in that man, Siddhartha saw this incredible possibility, that maybe peace wasn't about hiding from suffering, but about finding a way through. And that was it. The switch flipped. He knew he couldn't go back to living in blissful ignorance. So in the middle of the night, he left it all behind, his wife, his brand new son, his entire kingdom, to go find an answer to suffering. This moment is known as his Great Renunciation. So Siddhartha spends the next 6 years as a wandering ascetic, practicing extreme self-discipline. He studied with all the famous teachers and pushed his body to the absolute limit. But the answer to suffering? It was still nowhere to be found. He had this huge realization. He tried both extremes, right? In the palace, it was a life of total, non-stop indulgence. As an ascetic, it was a life of just brutal self-punishment. He almost starved himself to death. Neither one worked. And he figured the answer had to be somewhere in between. He called it the middle path. So following this new middle path, he sits down under a peepal tree in a place called Bodh Gaya, and he vows he is not getting up until he finds the truth. And after 49 days of intense meditation, he did it. He achieved enlightenment. He reached nirvana. Now, this is so important to get. Nirvana isn't some place like heaven. It's a state of mind that you can reach right here, right now. It's when those internal fires of craving and hate and ignorance are just completely put out. So now he's the Buddha, which just means the awakened one. He wasn't a god, he wasn't a prophet, he was a teacher. And what he offered was this incredibly clear, almost psychological blueprint that anyone could follow to find their own peace. His first teaching laid out the Four Noble Truths. You can kind of think of it like a doctor's diagnosis. First, a simple fact: life involves suffering, dissatisfaction, and pain. Second, the cause of that suffering. It comes from our own craving, our attachments, our constant wanting. Third, the good news: it's actually possible to end this craving. And fourth, the prescription for how to do it. And that prescription is the Eightfold Path. Now, this isn't a bunch of commandments like thou shalt not. It's more like a practical training program for your own mind. It combines ethical things like right speech and right action with mental discipline like right mindfulness. The whole thing is designed to untangle you from that endless cycle of craving and suffering.
So we've got this totally revolutionary philosophy, right? It rejects a rigid class system and offers a real, practical path to inner peace. But how on earth did it go from one man's discovery to an idea that would change the course of Asia?
Well, there were a few key reasons it just clicked. For one, unlike the Brahmin priests who used this elite language, Sanskrit, the Buddha taught in Pali, which was the language of the common person. His own personality was apparently incredibly charismatic, calm, wise. He also set up something called the Sangha, a really well-organized community of monks and nuns who kept his teachings alive and spread them. And, this is a big one, he won over some very powerful kings.
And the most important of all of them was Emperor Ashoka back in the 3rd century BC. After he converted, he threw the massive resources of his entire empire behind promoting Buddhism. Legend has it that he built 84,000 stupas. These are monuments with Buddhist relics inside, all across India. And he sent missionaries everywhere: Sri Lanka, Central Asia, even the Middle East. He was the one who really turned Buddhism into a world religion. So from a prince's deep personal crisis to a philosophy that literally reshaped a continent, the story of Buddhism really shows how one person's search for an answer can meet the needs of an entire generation. And that kind of leaves us with one last thought, right? In our modern world, which basically runs on an engine of constant want and distraction, what can we learn from a 2,500-year-old guide on how to stop craving?